Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. Ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it's a very happy Wednesday morning, September the 6th, to you and yours. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. Drew Hickens on the other side of the glass making things work. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm just fine. Just kind of holding my breath, crossing my fingers like everybody else about this hurricane that's kind of just sitting out there in the Atlantic at the moment. We don't know a ton about what it's going to do, but we do know a ton about the idea that Florida State may or may not have to move this game on Saturday, less for the people that are in town and more for the people who might be traveling into that game. As a matter of fact, WCTV chief meteorologist Mike McCaul, for you out-of-town folks, you may notice him from, of course, the Jumbotron at Doak. He's going to join us here in a little bit. I got to catch up with him last night at the WCTV newsroom. But before we do that, thanks so much for waking up with us here at 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio, or, of course, streaming over your mobile devices, the TuneIn Radio app, our own WTSM app. We're rather proud of that one. Make sure you're checking it out. Maybe it's our podcast you're listening to. It's on iTunes. It's Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com, YouTube, however it is you get it. We thank you very much for doing that. And if you like the show, we ask that you rate and subscribe because it helps us out and it helps you out as well. Questions, mailbag coming tomorrow, radio@warchant.com. That is where you can send them via email, at Wake Up War Chant, via Twitter. I think we're going to have Ryan Clark on tomorrow for the mailbag, and that's a good thing because Ryan Clark actually got a chance to cover and be around James Blackman in high school. So if you have questions about James Blackman, Ryan Clark's the guy to send them to. So make sure you're emailing us. Make sure you're sending your questions to us. We will tackle those tomorrow. And if there's any specific for anybody else that are pretty good, I'll make sure to pass those along their way and try to get that set up tomorrow. Finally, you know we can't do this without our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central, Township, all right there in the heart of College Town. Going to be a good time there on Saturday, regardless of when this game is played. Of course, it's looking more and more likely by the second. Nothing's been confirmed. Contrary to what some of the things you may have seen on the internet, there's still some hoops that need to get jumped through and all that this game is going to get moved to 12:15. And I think that's a good thing for everybody, for the folks that are traveling, especially if folks that are trying to evacuate and maybe you're trying to get their season tickets worth on their way out of the state. If you're from South Florida or South Central, you're trying to get out of here. I think it's good that you're moving that up for them. And I also think the idea that this game really, it was more a novelty and a luxury that if you were going to set your own kickoff time because it's an ACC network game, you were going to set it at 7 p.m. as a courtesy to, tailgate a little bit more and let people hang out, enjoy maybe the new stadium and the new season a little bit more with the home opener. But right now, I think as much as people are going to like the novelty of that, it's more important to get this game done, get people back concerned what they need to be back concerned about. And if you can still play the football game while doing all that, that's great.
Right. I mean, like you said, at the end of the day, obviously you would love the 7 p.m. kickoff, especially over a noon game. No one's a huge fan of noon games. But in this particular instance, I think it's the smartest thing to do. I think it eliminates all concern you have weather-wise of whether or not you can get the football game in or not. You move that game up to noon, you should be just fine. And like you said, it helps people who are evacuating or trying to get out of the state or what have you. Whatever people's plans are, I think it just helps everybody out in this situation. So to me, it makes the most sense. But like you said, still some hoops to go jump through. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But I would expect to see that game played around noon.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think we end up with it. You have that, and you also have the idea that this storm might be hitting South Florida. Now, the latest projections, and Mike McCall will get into this, when we talked at 11 last night, there's been another update in the projections, but not much has changed. The consensus kind of seems to think it's going to just kind of ride the East Coast up, and it's going to hit the Carolinas very, very bad. So it's looking like Florida is not quite, at this moment now, this is Wednesday morning, is not quite the target that it was just about 24, 48 hours ago. But it's still there, and it's still going to hit South Florida. We don't exactly know when, but here's the thing. We do know it's probably going to be sometime Sunday. We know it's bad enough for the NFL to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't play Finn's Bucks here on Sunday. And God forbid, if it is a direct hit, you don't know what's happening with your football game next week against the Miami Hurricanes, who could be without power, who could be in a far different South Florida than what they have at the beginning of this week. These are all questions I got to ask Mike McCall, like I said, the chief meteorologist from WCTV, friend of warchant.com, and all-around good dude. Got a chat with him last night. Here's what he had to say.
First of all, Mike, thanks so much for being on the show, my friend. Always appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Always a big War Chant fan from way back when Gene was just a baby website guy.
some FSUKnowles.com?
Actually, yes. I do remember that back when that was one of the first message boards around for FSU Sports.
So I know we've got a condensed time here, so I wanted to get straight into this, Mike. Is it safe to say there's going to be another advisory by the time this hits air, correct?
That's correct. The full advisories come out every 6 hours. So as of right now, when I'm speaking to you, the 11 o'clock advisory is out, and that's the information that I have, although I don't expect to see any major changes by the time you're hearing this.
All right, so 5 a.m. is going to roll around. We're going to get a new advisory. I know throughout the week you've definitely been telling people not to panic, not to get too crazy. I mean, obviously you've seen just driving up and down the gas stations, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Publixes, all the places that are out of water. Why should people kind of stay, I guess, cautious but not quite crazy at the moment?
Well, it's still a long way away, and we still have plenty of time to make preparations. So for all those people that have made your preparations, good on you. I know it's tough if you were in a long line at the gas station or at the grocery store, but we want everyone to be prepared. The good news is, by preparing so early, that leaves plenty of time for the folks that haven't, either by choice or by necessity, that they can still go ahead and prepare today or tomorrow or Friday. There's still time. There's still no need to panic. We will know a lot more each day now. We're kind of getting within that 5-day period when the forecasts become more reliable. And as each day we'll get better and better data that's fed in all those computer models that we'd love to look at, those spaghetti plots that we look at online. But it gives us a better framework for the forecast, which will, again, the full forecast come out every 6 hours.
And with that being said, I know before we even started recording, we were looking at a consensus. And right now, I know the spaghetti models were kind of all over the place over the last 24, 48 hours. But right now, the consensus, it looks like it's going to come up the Florida coast east side as of right now. But it looks like the Carolinas is right now where some folks think this is going to land.
Well, as you said, right now, and as we've seen over the last few days, that can change sometimes every 6 hours, sometimes every 12 hours. If you remember several days ago when it was way out in the Atlantic, those forecasts stayed well to the east of the U.S., and then it kept creeping closer and closer toward South Florida and even some signs maybe the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and now they've started to kind of go back the other way. We call that the windshield wiper effect, where the models literally just kind of slide over one direction and then come back. We may not be done with that. There will certainly be some adjustments. Wherever the forecast models say right now, you pick your favorite one, it probably will not be there in 5 days. So take all those things with a grain of salt and concentrate more on the next couple of days.
About when do you think North Florida, especially, of course, the Big Bend area, Tallahassee, there's a game Saturday, of course, that people are debating, should it be moved up earlier? I know North Florida-wise, it's not supposed to really affect till Sunday night, Monday, correct?
That's correct. I don't see any major effects locally at all through the end of this week. And even into Saturday, it's likely going to be a South Florida issue. But as of the 11 o'clock advisory, it has the center near South Florida Sunday early evening. So absolutely there would be no impact here on Saturday. Beyond that, if it makes a turn toward the north earlier, it could perhaps be a little bit closer. But it's all I can say is that Saturday activities, I don't see any major issues here. Now, my son had a soccer tournament scheduled this weekend in Kissimmee. That's been canceled because they don't want people traveling south or people that are in South Florida having to travel back and forth. So that's going to happen, and that's the same reason for the Bucs-Dolphins game and these things being rescheduled. A lot of that has to do with people traveling. Not necessarily they think conditions are going to be awful at that time, but why take the risk of having people on the roads either going or leaving one of those kinds of events.
Especially for a home opener that I think as of about 72 hours ago, a lot more people wanted to see than maybe before the Alabama game kicked off.
Well, that's true, but I'm looking forward to it. I'll be there doing my pregame weather forecast up on the big board as usual. Again, I don't see any major weather issues. If anything, you're really going to like the local weather Thursday and Friday. We've got our first decent cold front coming through, and likely it's going to hold on and give us some delightful weather on Saturday. But while the weather will still be nice here, by then we should have a firm grasp on where we think Irma will be headed for the rest of the weekend and into early next week.
And that's where it gets really interesting, because depending on what this does in South Florida, you've got a game against, well, a pretty big football program in South Florida who may be dealing with a lot of devastation.
Correct. And that remains to be seen. The exact path of Irma will obviously have a huge impact on South Florida, whether it's Southwest Florida, Southeast Florida, or perhaps just off the coast like Hurricane Matthew did last year. That would be preferable to Florida residents, I'm sure, rather than one that's over land. But in this particular system, good for some folks is still going to likely be bad for someone else. So we're just going to have to wait and see. I'll just reiterate, I don't think we have any weather issues locally here for Saturday, but by Sunday we could see deteriorating conditions depending on exactly where Irma goes.
We'll keep an eye on it, and we'll definitely, I guess, keep chatting on this one, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Happy to do it, and I look forward to seeing everybody Saturday night.
And you can shout out the Big 8 if you'd like.
I always do. As a Big 8 alum from way back in the mid-'80s, I always give the Marching Chiefs and the Drumline Big 8 their props.
All right. Thank you. Mike McCaul, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Always good, always educational, always, I guess, talking you off the ledge a little bit, letting you know that wait for everything to see how it's going to play out. Of course, if you feel like you need to stock up, if you feel like you need to evacuate, you do what you feel is best for your family. But at the end of the day, I quite like the forecast of some football wins in Tallahassee, to steal something from our own Jeff Cameron from the afternoon. Sounds good to me. A little cold front at night? Yeah. I'll take some of that. Give me that game at noon. Let me leave to something in the mid-70s. Oh, yeah. That sounds like football to me. We've got some more football to chit-chat about. We're going to play a little bit of this and that like we did last week. But before we do that, we're going to get you caught up on everything in the world of sports. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Why You Were Sleeping.
Hello. Good morning.
Wake up! Wake up!
Wake me up.
Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
All right, we already mentioned it. The storm's going to prevent Bucs-Dolphins from playing at Hard Rock Stadium on Sunday. No real alternative to that yet. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure the Bucs and the Dolphins share a bye week, so that should work out.
They were looking, I think, at week 11, but they were also saying as a possible neutral site, they were looking at Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, but it was to be decided today. I think they're obviously leaning more towards the week 11 game.
Yes, that most definitely is going to go out today, though. The Cleveland Indians won their 13th straight. That's so them. Well, I shouldn't say that's so them, because Cleveland has been a miserable franchise for a long time. It kind of follows their MO from last year, where they got super hot just at the right time, got into the playoffs hot, made themselves into the World Series. And speaking of which, the Diamondbacks tried 12 straight. And when you do that over the Los Angeles Dodgers, that's pretty impressive. That's 3-1 last night, 10 innings for the D-backs overall, pretty quiet day decently outside of the Ezekiel Elliott news. Of course, his 6-game suspension for violating the league's personal conduct policy has been upheld by an arbiter. However, because of when the decision came out, it did not come out in time to take effect on Sunday. So he's literally going to be able to play on Sunday, and then he's got to serve the suspension. I don't get NFL rules. It's weird. Anyway, when we come back, it's this or that. Joe Reedy of the Associated Press joins us to talk a little FSU football later. Lots of football coverage ahead on Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio. Headlines, college football headlines galore as we keep moving on Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by your friends at For the Table. So I thought it would be fun to do, like we plan on doing most weeks. Wednesday, taking a little look, what you prefer, what you think, something more true than maybe something else. Time for a little bit of this or that. And I wanted to start with one that kind of goes into the tropical storm, but I want this to be tropical storm aside. I want this to be, the storm wasn't here. Would you rather have that full day of tailgating, Drew, kick off this bad boy at 7 p.m., or would you rather tailgate after a noon kick with all the good football that's coming up that night?
I would much rather tailgate after and watch all the good football that's coming up that night. I think Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Clemson, Auburn are both night games. I would much rather watch those. Obviously, I would be at our game if it was at 7, as it was supposed to be, and I would miss those games. But it's not the worst thing in the world that I now get to watch both of them.
Once again, storm aside, I'm not trying to get in people's feelings. I know there are a lot of people who are struggling and may be in harm's way. But other question, does it help Florida State if this game ends up getting played in the first week of October, or does it help Miami?
That would help Miami. I think you definitely want James Blackman to get a game under his belt. It doesn't really matter who you're playing. Him getting out there, getting in a routine, playing in Doak, regardless if it's at noon or 7, I think is a big deal for him, big deal for the team, feel how they're comfortable. We'll all get a good first look at him before the Miami game. I think that would obviously help Miami.
Oh, I was talking about the actual Miami game itself.
What do you mean?
There's talk that maybe if South Florida's devastated, you might end up moving that Miami game.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess first week of I guess that would benefit Florida State then, because James Blackman would get more time under his belt.
But you also have a new quarterback getting more time under Miami's belt. That's kind of the catch-22 I'm trying to get at.
Right, but I'm going to be honest. Rozier's not a guy that's really going to scare me. I'm sure they're not exactly afraid of James Blackman either. But I think you stand more to gain than they do. But again, all things aside, I think it's best for Florida State for, I guess, this game to be played when it's supposed to be played, because like you said, they would get more time. Sure, we would get more time too, but maybe it's more in our benefit to hit them now. I don't know. That's a good question.
I think it's also the idea that you're guaranteed a primetime game at home where people are going to be amped and ready to go. You're going to have that built-in advantage for you. Meanwhile, if you move that game, there's no guarantee when that's going to be, what time that's going to be. Heck, if this gets really bad, and again, I'm not wishing for this. I hope this thing goes straight back into the sea and dies somehow in the Atlantic. I know science won't let that happen, but I hope that's what happens. So completely whatever happens with the storm aside, you really don't know. There's more unknowns with that bye week than anything, to where you really just hope that you can play this guy next week. Here's an interesting one. I thought of this one off the top of my head. Would you rather the defense underperform your expectations this season and James Blackman overperform your expectations for him this season? Or would you rather Blackman be about what you thought and the defense be about what you thought?
I would rather the defense be about what I thought and Blackman be about what I thought, because at the end of the day, no matter how much James Blackman overtakes my expectations for him. He's not going to be, I hate to break it to all of you, he's not going to be a championship caliber quarterback, the guy that carries your team to a title. That's not who he's going to be as a true freshman. Point blank, end of story. Florida State's defense has that potential to be a championship caliber defense if they are not already, which I think they might be. It's hard to say one game in, but you got a pretty good look against Alabama and what they could do against pretty much the best team in the nation. Everybody knows that. So I would much rather that defense, stay up there than I would James Blackman exceed my expectations.
I think you took the words right out of my mouth. There's an old cliche that people continually go back to because it's always true, and that's that defense wins championships. Can quarterback win you championships? Of course it can. But that defense is elite. If it continues to play the way it did in week 1, there's no reason you can't hang around with anybody in the country. Sometimes quarterbacks have bad games. The best have bad games. But overall, as a unit, you've got to scheme against a whole unit. You've got to go up against a whole unit. It's not just, how do I exploit one or two guys? When you have a defense this good and you're an offensive coordinator, sometimes you shake your head and you say, well, where is the weakness? Where is the problem? Where is that? So, honestly, I'm with you. I think having this defense be at that level and having a learning curve for James Blackman the same way you think there would be a learning curve for a true freshman in a really tough offense like this would be important. Switching gears a little bit, game that ends up meaning more at the end of the year now to college football. Oklahoma, Ohio State, or Auburn, Clemson?
That's hard. That's hard. Just because I'm going to go. This is hard because I think really highly of Auburn. And obviously, you gotta give Clemson the respect they deserve, but I think Ohio State's a more surefire playoff team than either of those two squads. And Oklahoma's obviously right there in the mix. They have Baker Mayfield. There's not the question mark at quarterback that Clemson has. Yeah, Kelly Bryant looked good week 1, but what do you really know about him? I'm gonna say that Ohio State, Oklahoma will have a bigger impact at the end of the year than Auburn, Clemson.
This is a super tough one for me just because I think more and more rivalry weekend is going to play a big deal for the games and for the teams involved in both those games. If Michigan looks the part, they can beat Ohio State at home. If Oklahoma State is as good as advertised, they should beat Oklahoma. And even then, considering it's a round-robin still format, they could meet again in the Big 12 title game a week later. Auburn is about the only team in the Iron Bowl, or the only team in the SEC who is going to have a legitimate shot and chance at beating Alabama when they played that game in the Iron Bowl at the end of the year. I think it's great that Rivalry Saturday means so much for all those teams, but it kind of clouds your judgment for what happens right now because rivalry games are so volatile, because anything can happen, especially when they involve two really, really good teams. I think it ends up being right now Clemson and Auburn, and I only say that because I think Oklahoma State's a better team than Oklahoma. That's not to say it's a guaranteed shoo-in that they're going to win. I mean, look at that overall series record, and you'll see exactly what I mean when I say that. But Clemson, I think now is a player in the college football playoff if they're better than we think they are. And not even that. If they truly are, let's face it, they looked impressive against Kent State. Yeah, I get it. It's Kent State. It's the Golden Flashes. They're slow. Clemson was always going to beat them. But I think the fact that Kelly Bryant looks so good, you already mentioned it, that's what gets a little fascinating. That's what gets a little curious to me. Because if Florida State isn't a full go, Clemson gets Florida State at home, Clemson becomes a bigger player in that college football playoff picture, and there may be a little bit more to play for than you maybe thought if they beat Auburn early on in this season. Auburn can still probably get in with one loss. I don't know about the Clemson Tigers.
Right. I think that's why it's so tough, because projections aside, really, to me, the reason why you think, for me, I think Ohio State, Oklahoma is because out of all four of those teams, who's the one team that you can point to and say is most probable to be there near the end? I would say it would be Ohio State. But that being said, as far as the game goes, I see where you're coming from because Oklahoma is breaking in it. They got a new coach in Lincoln Riley, so you don't really know what you have there. There's just a lot of question marks along the board because Auburn's got Stidham. There's been a lot of talk about how good he is and how good that defense could possibly be. But again, you don't really know, and it's kind of the same deal with Clemson. So at the end of the day, it's a tough call, but you could see it going either way.
And, people are going to accuse me of poking Oklahoma here, and even though I like poking Oklahoma, I'm not trying to in this moment. It's the idea that what does Oklahoma look like in a big game without quote-unquote big game Bob? This is a big test for Lincoln Riley early in that how does this program look? Because you're right. We're going to see a different demeanor on the sideline maybe, but you're going to see the same defense. You're going to see the same offense. You're going to see the same pieces that you've seen from Oklahoma year in and year out for season upon season upon season now. But how do they react mentally in a big game like this? Because let's not forget, Ohio State went into Norman last year, a place that they really pride themselves on people not going in and winning, and they beat the crap out of them for 4 quarters, beat them soundly. I want to see how Oklahoma responds to that this time around and without their big-time threat in D.D. Westbrook, who's now in the NFL.
It's safe to say that both games are incredibly intriguing. I'm looking forward to watching them and seeing. What I'm really going to be looking for selfishly is I do want to see how Kelly Bryant does against that Auburn defense. I do want to see how Kelly Bryant does in a big game because at the end of the day, if he is as good as you think he might be, that's a problem because that Clemson defense is good. That we do know. And they have the weapons around Kelly Bryant to be a really good football team again. He's a big, athletic kid. If he is a pretty decent quarterback, then you're right. Clemson automatically becomes a big player in the college football playoff discussion, especially with Florida State losing Francois. I know we all hate to hear that, but at the end of the day, if you have to go in there with a true freshman quarterback,
that's
as opposed
that's not an easy task,
right? That's just a tough game to win.
I think most of the points you made, though, I think you turn around and the exact same is true about Auburn. If that quarterback's for real. If Jarrett Stidham's the guy, that defense is really good. And Auburn immediately becomes a player. I think that's why this game ends up maybe being more important than Oklahoma-Ohio State, because no matter what happens to them, unless they just fall off the face, they're going to be contenders, they're going to be in the debate, and they're going to be in that discussion probably till that rivalry Saturday after Thanksgiving. Auburn and Clemson are both teams that we kind of think can be good, but we're not exactly sure. Clemson's got the high ranking because the national champion always gets the benefit of the doubt. Auburn, imagine how quick they're going to shoot up these polls if they win this game. And I get it. They're right there. They're, 11th in the new AP poll? There's something of that nature. I'll pull that up. But, yeah, they're going to shoot up this thing if they end up beating Clemson in their house. They're 13th, by the way, in that AP poll. They're behind LSU. Which I get it. LSU had a nice win against BYU over the weekend, but I don't see the end of the season shaking out where LSU's ahead of Auburn. I just don't see that scenario happening. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe they can finally score points at LSU. Again, I get it. They look good over the weekend, but that's just kind of the way I see it. Underrated game of the weekend. It's got to be the Holy War, right? And it's just because Utah BYU is always good. And I know that's kind of off the beaten path of, hey, we're talking about top 10 football here. I'm just saying this as a public service announcement for you. For you. Utah BYU is always a good game, and you should watch it. All right. Finally, team who needs to look better on Saturday against a decent opponent. Louisville or USC?
I think USC. USC already dropped 2 spots for their showing against Western Michigan. Louisville's not really on anyone's radar nationally yet. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is. Lamar Jackson's going to Lamar Jackson. He'll put up the numbers regardless of how that team looks. At the end of the day, Louisville's firepower is going to be in their schedule. If they're really going to make a move, is going to be a little bit later. I think USC has more to lose here because they're already so close to the top. Everybody's watching them. a lot of the way they started last year, 1-3 off the bat. I think people want to see that they're past that. I'll say USC.
Well, the thing is, you're right. Clay Helton ends up getting a reputation if they stumble out of the gate again and they get strong at the end of the. He becomes the reverse Kevin Sumlin, doesn't he? That's literally exactly what happens. So that being said, I'm with you just because I think everybody knows Louisville's got problems and everybody's known Louisville has issues. But I'll be honest with you, the team I'm more excited to see in that Louisville game is North Carolina. Because if there's another thing we know about that game, it's that North Carolina always seems to be trash in week 1, and then they'll immediately turn it around. So I want to see if Larry Fedora, replacing his number 2 pick from the NFL draft, can turn it around completely in a game in his backyard in Kenan Stadium, noon kick on ESPN. When we come back, it's more Florida State football talk with our friend Joe Reedy on Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Yes, Florida State just landed a 5-star commitment.
I don't see that anywhere online. How did you get that news so fast?
I'm on the new warchant.com app. I get news updates and scores pushed to my phone instantly.
How much does it cost?
It's free. Just go to iTunes or the Google Play Store, type in Warchant, and install it on your phone. That's it.
A free app that keeps me constantly up to date on Florida State sports and recruiting? Wow, that makes it incredibly easy to follow my Seminoles and never miss out.
With the app, you'll also get quick access to all the stories and features on Warchant, including the ever-popular message boards that feature thousands of fans talking about the Noles.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
Welcome back to Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by your friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central Allen Township, all there in the heart of College Town. It's, I don't want to say unprecedented that you lose your quarterback like this and you start a true freshman the way you are, but if you're Florida State, it's certainly uncharted waters for you. And to get that, maybe a little perspective from somebody who's been a thing or two, seen a thing or two, and has certainly dealt with his fair share of injury covering over the years. And that, of course, is our friend Joe Reedy from the Associated Press, who joins us via the phone line. Joe, how are you, my friend?
Doing good, Ryan. How you doing?
I'm all right, bud. I want to ask you right off the bat, have you ever covered an injury as big as this one? Were you there for the Carson Palmer injury in Cincinnati when you covered the Bengals?
I was, but I think if you look in terms of college in a more recent case, I would say 2014 with Ohio State preseason, everybody thinks Braxton Miller's going to be good to go, suffers the injury, and JT Barrett steps in, and I mean, they go 1-1 the first couple games, and then Barrett starts to get some momentum and carries them to the Michigan game before he gets hurt, and then Cardale Jones steps in and directs them the rest of the way to the national championship. So if people are looking with their main starting quarterback going out and having a guy having to step in rather quickly, I would use Ohio State and Urban Meyer 3 years ago.
I would say that's kind of the best case scenario, and I'd say kind of the floor with an elite team like this. Let's rewind the clocks back a little bit further to 2009. Oklahoma State plays in an opening season game. I believe it was at Jerry World against BYU, and Sam Bradford goes down. Landry Jones ends up stepping in, very, very inexperienced, and Oklahoma really struggled at key points throughout that year. I don't think it'll quite be there for Florida State, but I also don't think it'll be quite the magical run of quarterback depth that the Buckeyes found in that 2014 season.
Yeah, and also if you're Jimbo Fisher, you're really not hoping that it's the last time that he had to go with a true freshman at quarterback, which was Gabe Gross back at Auburn in the late 90s, of which Auburn goes 3-8. Terry Bounds fired midway through the season, and they have a regime change, and next thing you know, Jimbo's at the University of Cincinnati the next year, but it ends up okay because he reunites with Nick. He goes with Nick Saban and LSU the following year, and then the rest is history.
So that being said, you and I, whenever we've spoke a lot in fall camp and in the preseason, a lot of times we've talked about this being a big year for Jimbo Fisher, this being a big year for how he's able to prove himself, how he's able to prove where he is in the pantheon of coaches. And he's obviously not getting Terry Bowden and shown the door, and Florida State's obviously not finishing 3-9 on the season, but I do think if things go a little bit more south than expected, he gets a mulligan. But if he has a great year, if he exceeds the expectations of starting a true freshman quarterback that he didn't plan on starting, I do think that Jimbo Fisher earns a little bit of credit this season.
Yeah, and I don't know too, Ryan, whether you give him a mulligan or not, because recruiting and the decisions that you made 2-3 years ago, all of a sudden come back and catch up to you. Now with DeAndre Johnson, had a couple of other guys surpassed him, would he have still been here at this point if the off-field incident didn't happen? Who knows? But with Malik Henry, there were a lot of off-field issues and red flags where I kind of agree with Corey Clark in his column in the Tallahassee Democrat that ran Monday night, Tuesday morning, that this could have been easily avoided to where now you're a program where among at least Power 5 schools, you've got the least amount of experience and depth behind you. And let's face it, also with this offensive line and some issues, and with as thin as James Blackman is, can he last an entire season? You're almost looking at it the way of a second-string NFL guy. If their starter gets knocked out week 1, can this guy last the entire season or not? And being a Browns fan, I'm certainly used to going to your second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth options at quarterback.
I knew you were going to squeak that in there. But, Joe, in all seriousness, I do agree with you there to an extent. I just think for a lot of the folks who are writing the narrative on a national scale, I don't know how many of them are going to look at that, but I certainly do agree with you there in that this is something that maybe could have been avoided. This is something that maybe should have been worked around with Florida State, and that DeAndre Johnson, you get a pass for because there were no character flags. The kid made an awful mistake, but he's been genuinely apologetic about. But the Malik Henry one is one that I think a lot of people will sit back, and if this season goes south, they will raise an eyebrow at.
Yeah, and I mean, quarterback depth, especially at a major college program, if you recruit 2 or 3 4- and 5-star guys, they're not going to stay throughout. I mean, Steve Spurrier during his days at Florida recruited plenty of 5-star guys and made it a competition, and somebody would always end up leaving. Now, I think you see with Blackman and Hockman, hopefully what goes on. Jake Rizzo, all of a sudden, does he go into the equation? I mean, I think it's not a good sign for J.J. Cosentino that, Jimbo immediately goes to a true freshman, and you wonder with J.J. whether this is his last year in the program or not. But I think we're also going to see how good with Jimbo and this coaching staff, how good they are at developing players, and especially quarterback, where, let's face it, you're a little limited right now, and you were limited at skill positions coming into the year with lack of experience. And, this is where the defenses are really going to have to carry them.
And, you mentioned the defense, and I'm happy you were able to segue into that. I do feel like this is a little bit different of an idea of when a major piece of an offense goes down, and that this defense is going to carry a lot of games for Florida State. And even with DeAndre Francois, you mentioned it. There was a lot of uncertainty on this offense. How do the young wide receivers work? How does the running game look after Dalvin Cook? How does the offensive line hold up? I think you got pretty positive answers for all of that, except maybe the running game against Alabama. But a lot of people thought the defense was going to have to carry the way anyway. So you kind of get yourself in a situation where I told Drew a little bit earlier on the show on Monday's program, this almost feels like you're going to be one of those late 2000s LSU teams in a worst-case scenario, and that you're going to have an offense that sometimes looks lost but has some talent on it. However, you have to rely on your defense to carry the day.
Yeah, and I think this defense, Ryan, is also good at saying, hey, our Dobbers were down after Derwin was lost, and we saw how it affected us against LSU and North Carolina. We do not want the same thing to happen to you guys. I mean, this is a mental gut punch. There's no doubt about it. But I think the defense can tell them, listen, don't let last year happen again. And I think there's leaders on this offensive line, too, that they're going to have to pick up the skill guys and go, lean on us. We can get it done. And for the most part, the offensive line played well. I mean, there were some late hits after the ball that was released and stuff that, you cringe at a little bit. But for the most part, as far as keeping a clean pocket and giving DeAndre time to pass, they gave it to him. But the rest of these guys at running back, receiver, and Ryan Izzo, they've got to show up and help this freshman out.
Finally, in your experience, how do you usually see seasons like this where you have such a big injury but talent around shaking out?
I think we're really not going to be able to tell this week, Ryan. I think we will get a better idea of this team starting with Miami next week, and even with DeAndre. That win, and granted on Miami in past years, was always a tooth and nail game. So, I mean, probably 2-3 loss team right now, but who knows? This could be the 1999 Rams too, where an unheralded kid named Kurt Warner carried him to the Super Bowl. But hopefully, the good thing is on Monday, Jimbo Fisher didn't have a Dick Vermeil crying jack when DeAndre went down. So I consider that a good thing.
And of course, you mentioned them. I hate to put this comparison on a true freshman, but the year after, the St. Louis Rams lose to another first-year quarterback.
Yeah, with Tom Brady and the Patriots. So that's the beautiful thing about football, Ryan. And I know we talk in cliches and coaches and stuff, but anything can happen. And I'd rather it's better it happened this year with the quarterback getting hurt than last year, because with the defense and the learning curve they had the first half of last season, it could have turned in a hurry, especially too with the Showtime cameras here.
Final thoughts from you, Joe. I did want to ask you one last thing. Florida State ends up tumbling right to the back of the top 10. Do you think that was more effect of what happened on the field or the injury that ended up ending at the end of that game?
I think a combination of both. I think if DeAndre was still the quarterback, probably dropped to 7 or 8. I think the fact that DeAndre did get hurt is probably worth a position or two drop. So, had DeAndre not been hurt, probably a drop from 3 to 7, but 9 in the coaches, 10 in the AP. It probably a good thing is they didn't get dropped worse. So I think it's a fitting drop, but at least they're still in the top 10.
Yes, sir. They are still holding on. Joe, thanks as always for joining us. Always appreciate it, my friend. I've been looking throughout the board, and I don't know. I know Jeff Cameron plays Renegades of Funk. Now, for those who don't know, Joe has requested Rage Against the Machine for his playout music, and I can't find it in the system to save my life, and neither could Drew. So I apologize for this time, but I promise you I'll get you some Bullswan Parade or something for the next.
Not a problem. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe Reedy of the Associated Press. Folks, we're putting a bow on it. Right after this is Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Dragging my feet, I feel like everybody's watching me cut my teeth.
Super overtime, folks. We got to run. Thanks so much to you guys for listening. Mike and Mike's up next. 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.
Hey, thanks for downloading today's show. If you haven't already, why don't you rate and subscribe us? We certainly do appreciate it, and of course, we appreciate you listening anyway. So,
Just go ahead and click that right there. You know you want to. Come on. Come on. Thanks again for letting us do the show. We love giving you all the football, basketball, baseball, recruiting all year round. Not just football season, not just spring practice, but hopefully giving you the freshest and newest FSU content every day. Thanks, guys.